You're tuning in to the Bueno Power Hour podcast. Power Hour podcast, episode number 10 with Jack Shirley. We talk a little bit about his upbringing as a musician, his involvement with Comadre, a little bit about his record producing career, and what it meant to be documenting Bay Area punk. Just a lot of fun in this conversation. It's kind of getting up to speed on what's been going on with him and his future endeavors. So, yeah, it was an awesome conversation. I hope you guys enjoy it. But yeah, sit back and enjoy the show. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Bueno Power Hour podcast. I got a very special episode for you. On this one, we have Jack Shirley. He is a record producer, record engineer, and owner of the Atomic Garden Studios that is currently, I think, now in Oakland. Is that what I'm understanding? And say that one more time.
Yeah, we just finished moving.
Awesome. But I known of Jack actually in his previous work in Comadre, and have been a big fan of Comadre for many years, many years. And they sort of taught me DIY ethic. They taught me about, sort of putting emotional aggression in music and, really trying things out. These days he's not, playing as much as that I don't know of, but he has recorded quite a bit. And, he has recorded acts such as Dangers, Gouge Away, Deaf Heaven, Lama Prieta, to name a few. And I think the last project I have heard from from Jack was Everybody Row, if I'm not mistaken. But I kind of wanted to sort of spill a kind of a fun fact, actually. So I don't know if you remembered, but you had recorded a friend of mine's band from Fresno, California. The band was called Grow.
Oh yeah, for sure.
The
Parisis?
Yeah. My friend Dak Feaster is actually in this band, and the reason why I brought this up is because they brought you a homemade bottle of root beer.
Mm-hmm.
Are you a root beer aficionado?
I have been over the years for sure. I had quite a collection going. It didn't make the move. It got recycled, but I had like 125 bottles that were actually, kind of like on display in the back of the control room at the old spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people would occasionally try to bring me, stuff that I hadn't had or something like that. It was, it was cool. And I still do like root beer, but I don't. I think I hit the ceiling in terms of what you could collect in the States. So yeah.
Yeah, and I remember that because I was kind of a frequent follower of your website before it got kind of cleaned up and kind of reformatted kind of a bit. You had like a listing of bands that you worked with, and then now it's kind of like changed because obviously new location has changed. So I think in this interview, I'm not going to so much talk about sort of your journey as a recording engineer. That was actually, I think you did that interview, last year with World Class Audio, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah, Working Class Audio.
Working Class Audio, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
And I did, to be honest, I listened to that podcast quite a bit. That specific episode, because this is actually the only interview in audio that I know of that you've done. And I know that you don't really do much interviews, and obviously because you're always busy, you don't really have time. And And I do appreciate you coming on in. But I do want to talk about your upbringing as a musician, and what sort of Bay Area punk. I mean, because your band Comadre was a big component to Bay Area scene, the Bay Area punk scene, and when I hear Comadre, I think of Bay Area punk. What was it like for you growing up? I guess being part of this scene.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we were just talking about this yesterday. Actually, I was recording some guys that were similar age group and talking about how important skateboarding was in all of our lives, and especially when it came to our musical exposure as young people, you know, and how much it shapes your taste and you know, I don't know, just in the width of what you get exposed to, you know, and one of the guys was talking about how he felt very left out because not having been part of that culture, he kind of missed out on like a bunch of really great music early on. So not even just punk, but I was talking about that though, that like, you know, skate videos were the first time I ever heard bands, Bay Area bands, Rancid, or you know, whatever, Operation Ivy, Green Day, you know, that sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
So, you know, when I was 12 in like 93, that was the beginning of all that stuff. And then you start playing guitar, you know, it's you know, Green Day, the Green Day thing hit in 94, and like, you know, punk exploded and like everybody wanted to be in a band, and I was, you know, that was a prime time. So yeah, I mean, the early it was like skate punk type stuff, and with a pretty wide range of like other music as well, you know, like listening to skate videos, you get, you know, listen to oldies and 80s music and like whatever, heavy stuff and hip hop and whatever else. So it just kind of happened that, I don't know, playing like more kind of screamo stuff, I guess, was like something that I gravitated toward, because it was just like, it kind of melded a lot of different genres, you know, like it's like kind of, it's too heavy to be punk, but it's like too light to be indie, or I'm sorry, it's too heavy to be indie rock, but it's too light to be punk or whatever. Or hardcore rather. It's like, and it kind of melds all these different subgenres into this thing all of its own, you know? So,
right.
So yeah, I don't know, but in terms of an upbringing, I mean, like the scene was, when I first started, was like the peninsula was full of kids that were all real excited and just getting into making music and going to shows. And there was a really good, like, supportive, pretty like robust amount of people, like, you know, all the same age range. I think it's thinned out extremely significantly since then. But like, but when you came in, you know, out of high school, it was like 99, and then like into the early 2000s was when kind of like this like rebirth of like hardcore and like a bunch, you know what I mean, with stuff like all the stuff coming out of Boston, like whatever, you know, Cave In and Converge and like American Nightmare and
absolutely,
you know, the stuff out of Seattle, like Murder City Devils and Botch and all those bands, like all that stuff was kind of hitting at once, and like that was all very instrumental, I think, in what happened. You know, Comadre started in 2004, and so it was kind of like the byproduct of all those different influences, you know, bands like Thursday or you know, or even going real far back like Rites of Spring, that sort of stuff. Like all those things just kind of like piled up, and here we are.
Well, so what was the first band? Did you have a band prior to playing Comadre?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in bands since I was you know, 14, 15, but like nothing terribly serious, you know. But there was a band that my brother and I were in right before Comadre, like right up until Comadre started, and a band that Kenny and Juan, the other pair of brothers in Comadre, were in, and we were both kind of emo, screamo type bands that that both ended up kind of ending right around the same time. And so my brother and I were very used to making music together, and it was the kind of it was like, hey, we should hit these guys up and see. But there was a band called One Zone Ruin.
Okay.
That my brother was in. It was a 3-piece, and he and I played guitar and bass, and both sang. There was a band before that called Anti-45, which was kind of a like ska punk or like punk with horns kind of thing. It was like heavily like AFI influenced, but with like a horn section.
Wow.
They yeah, I mean there was a handful of bands, but it all like I don't know. I was never in anything as serious as Comadre until that band started, where like the whole group was like very hungry to make music and to go on tour. I'd never really toured before Comadre, and I don't think any of us had really the way that we eventually would,
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, I'm getting off topic, but yeah, there were of course there were definitely bands before.
Yeah. And that's kind of what's interesting about because when I was playing music in Fresno and I discovered you guys, I think I saw you guys for the very first time at the CYC in Fresno, and I think this is with Dangers, possibly. Sure. It was either Dangers and with Ghost Limb. And it could have been with Ceremony as well too, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure.
But I guess kind of talk to me about how you knew about Juan and Kenny, and sort of like how you guys sort of all met, and like what was the first day of practice was like with you guys?
It was awesome, actually. The first day, I have the first practice still recorded. We wrote a song, the first practice that was like, that I think was, the band that Steven and I had been in previously, we were kind of trying to switch directions a little bit. Like the songs, we had been doing these really long format songs where like the songs were like, 10 and 14 minutes long or whatever. And like, kind of more arty, but we were trying to do stuff a little bit more, a little more straightforward, and like our drummer wasn't feeling it, and so it was kind of falling apart. And then like those guys, they had a band called Heart Cross Love where Juan sang and Kenny played guitar. And so I don't know, we didn't even know them all that well. We had played a bunch of a handful of shows with them and like seen them around, and we're definitely aware of the band, but I don't think we'd ever really hung out, all of us. And so so it was the two brothers and my brother and myself, and then Wes, the drummer, was an old friend of my brother's from school, and so and they had played in bands together, and so it was kind of like, hey, let's just get together and just see what happens, And we wrote a song the first practice, and like I don't know, it felt super good, and it was absolutely the right place and the right time. You know what I mean, for the five of us, and yeah, I don't know. It was great. Like I had I don't know what I must have finished. I think I was finishing school. We were all in school, but like we all had schedules and jobs that allowed us to leave, and so it was the first time I was with a group of people that were like really raring to go, and had the like the means to like free up time and without just like destroying your life, or like quitting your job or whatever, Yeah, we were all kind of lucky like that. So, but anyway, yeah, first practice, right off the bat, there was like good chemistry there,
Man, and see, that's the kind of thing that I noticed in your guys' shows. When I first experienced you guys live, and you kind of tapped onto the idea of screamo, as you guys were. I guess you guys can say you were labeled that. I always thought it was kind of like it was a little bit more than that. I mean, obviously, Juan was like, screaming, pretty much the whole time, but it was so funny because I don't know how the fuck you guys did it. And Jack, I always focused on you when it came to guitar playing because you played some pretty soulful R&B jazz chords and somehow fucking implemented it in punk. Like, you know what I mean? And I know that in like a lot of screamo bands they would implement jazz and stuff, but it was really like it was really sporadic sounding. I can't remember which specific album it was, but it was like there's one specific song where like there's hand claps going on, and you can totally dance to it. Kind of going back prior to Comadre, what were some of your aside from like the influences that the bands that were coming out of Boston, coming out of Seattle, were there any other influences of bands that sort of had you focus on that style of playing?
I mean, I think when that Thursday record came out, Full Collapse, I was fucking pumped on that record. But like, but before all that, I guess like, it's funny. I was just talking about this the other day, with my girlfriend and I were talking about just like, playing music again, me playing music again and like what that even meant and all that stuff. And I was trying to explain that, like, I was explaining to her that like, I think I stopped caring about, guitar as like an instrument, like forever ago, you know what I mean? Like it happened to be the thing that I'm proficient enough at to like express what I want to happen. But for me, it was more about like songwriting, you know what I mean? Rather than like, anything else. So like the guitar work is not like it's not like technical or anything like that.
No.
But yeah, I mean, like, I don't have like a jazz background or anything like that. Like, I can't actually play any, like properly play any jazz music. But I grew up, like learning Jimi Hendrix songs and like, being into like that sort of guitar playing. Well, definitely, there's a big soul influence for sure. Always.
Right, and that's kind of like, and I've always wanted to talk to you about that. Because as a person who plays, we're gonna kind of get a little bit nerdy here because,
sure.
You and I think you still had that gold top Gibson Les Paul, right?
Yeah.
Was that the only guitar you've ever purchased, or you have more guitars?
I've had others over the years, but that was my first real guitar, and it has been basically since is like my main thing. But the like that guitar has a story for sure, though. I mean, like when I was 15, my parents were very like conservative and very both like whatever socially and financially. And they were all about like saving money and work ethic and like all this sort of business. And definitely like probably two of the least art-minded people that I've ever known. So we definitely like, there's a lot, and in a lot of ways we never really got each other. And it's odd to me still that my brother and I kind of came out of that. But yeah, so when I was 15, I was told, I had a job for a little while. I was working in an auto shop when I was like 14, cleaning up, and I'm, so just learning the value of like work and saving your own money and all that stuff. And so, my dad made me a deal. He's like, hey, you're going to save up $1,500. And then when you do, I'll match it if you save up that much money, and then you can get a car. That was the idea. So when you turn, and it was just an exercise in like discipline. And so, so I saved up $1,500 and I went down to the local music store in Redwood City and I bought that guitar instead of a car. And so, and I remember still like they told me I was crazy. Like they're like, you're crazy. I can't believe you're doing this with your money and all this stuff. And like, you should be responsible. And, I think it was like $1,600. I had to put it on layaway actually because I had $1,000 to put down. And I held it on layaway until I could pay the rest off. And yeah, I don't know. But that guitar I bought when I was 16. Okay. And now I'm 37, and that guitar's been like around the world like 5 times, and and around the States probably another 5 times. And I still have it. It's my main guitar. Like I'm supposed to start playing again at the beginning of next year, and that's the guitar I will be playing. So,
I
uh,
and
yeah,
to kind of just like sort of slightly move forward. I kind of want to get into that because here's the thing, Jack. I miss you playing music. I'm a big
thank
fan. I really love how you and Kenny and just the band together had created these compositions. I'm making it seem like more. Maybe people may think of it as like kind of just a straightforward style of music,
mm,
but I've always held you guys like to the top tier of what this is what punk to me was. You know what I mean?
that's
Um,
very. Thank you.
yeah, and it's true. You know what I mean? It really is true. Um, I would love to see you play music again. Are you starting a new project or are you doing Everybody Row again? Because I know that in like the last like damn like what 4 years it's just like nonstop like recording like bands after
Yeah,
bands, man, and
it's been very busy.
it has been. So let's kind of just talk about that, kind of veer off like kind of like the timeline.
Sure.
Are you starting to play in a new project? Or are you kind of going back into some of the old stuff, old band members that you've been with prior?
So there's been a lot of like deliberation on my end about that, and part of this whole new thing with the studio moving and having a second studio and another engineer and all that stuff is the idea that I will work less, and not like be just forever consumed with the studio,
Mm-hmm.
you know, out of the danger of burning out on it or something. And
Yeah.
so, um, so yeah, also like to backtrack at hair, like when Comadre stopped, it was kind of a big blow to all of us. Like it was kind of just like a, I don't know, like nobody was expecting it to stop as quickly as it did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a big disappointment, especially not being able to tour on the record that I think is like by far the best record
Yes. Yes, it
that we've
was. It
and
was.
so yeah, so it was disappointing to have to stop that quick, and it kind of like took the wind out of the sails a little bit, and then um, and then doing Everybody Row started to kind of like, hey, this is cool, but it didn't really go terribly well, and so that was like another kind of
Right.
like come down. So it was so I don't know. It's been kind of disappointing, and at the same time, um, like I said, like I'm like I'll sit down and play around on the guitar, but like I like guitar isn't a thing that like fuels me necessarily. It's songwriting and it's like collaboration and that sort of thing. So like so without having a thing like band practice or whatever, like I don't really have any. I don't really play music all that often, and so but anyway, but going forward, one of the things doing the Everybody Row thing that was a little daunting is like starting, you're starting from scratch. It's like
Yeah.
everything's kind of, it can be a little weird when you're used to something more established and all that. So, I had been kind of saying like, hey, it would be cool if I could find some good friends that are playing music, and B, maybe jump into something that's already established so that
Mm-hmm.
we like push start a whole brand new thing. Um, and so cue my dear friend Justin Smith quitting the band Dangers, and then they need a guitar player. So
Yes.
come January, I'm supposed to start playing in Dangers. So
And
we'll see.
that's wow. That's big news. And I'm a big fan of Dangers. I do like Al, and I love his like goofy ass personality. But man, I mean, you gotta admit, dude, he's a goofball. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But damn, when he's on stage, Jesus Christ, he's a totally
yeah,
different person, man.
yeah. And he's a really good old friend, and I'm a very big fan of the band. And yeah, I don't know. It seemed to just make a lot of sense to give it a whirl. So those guys have been writing a record for the last like year,
Yeah.
and originally I think the plan was that they were going to finish the record and then come up here to record, and I would kind of produce it and record it and all that stuff, and then learn the songs and learn some of the old stuff, and then I'd be in the band. But then Shook Ones is coming down to do some shows in January, and they asked Al if Dangerous wanted to play. So we're getting into it a little earlier than we planned, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it should be fun. I'm really looking forward to playing.
Dude, that's so exciting, man, and I'm so glad that you're still at it. And
Thank you.
I really am, because again, what I missed about Comadre and just you and the boys in general is that you guys thought differently amongst other bands that I've remembered, growing up. And I found out about you guys when I was, I think, 21 or 22, and it was a little late. And I know you guys kind of been around the Fresno area a while ago, prior to me like kind of finding out about you guys' stuff. But there's one thing that I've always loved about Comadre, and always loved about your guys' personality, is just the aspect of like DIY ethic. And I remember listening to the World Class Audio podcast, and you had mentioned about your father kind of giving you the working like ethic, and it shows, because the amount of bands that you have worked on and recording, all the trial and error, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Well, in Comadre, I mean, what was the intent of I guess what I'm trying to ask is that why did you guys decide to keep it just DIY? Was it just easier to do? Was it just you had what I'm trying to ask? I think what I'm trying to ask is like not many bands were doing DIY ethic like style of shit back in the day.
Sure.
And what drove
Sure.
you guys to kind of do that? Was it from the influences from the Bay Area punk scene? Was it from kind of efforts from like bands like Fugazi and such? I mean, what was it that kind of drove you guys to kind of just keeping it to yourselves and not distributing it to like a major label or some sort?
Oh, right. I mean, there's every road kind of leads to like what that outcome is, in terms of like there's a necessity, where like there weren't any labels that were like, hey, we want to put your records out in the beginning, and when you like just a handful, you're doing a small run of shows and you just need like whatever it might be, 30 CDs or whatever, you know what I mean? And you've got some art-minded folks, like Juan, who's like got some creative juice and was like, hey, I can make up some CD covers or whatever, like, or we can screen print our own shirts. Like it's way cheaper. We would we'd get like thrift store shirts and turn them inside out and screen print, do a one color screen print, or whatever. So like it really is out of necessity at the beginning. Like it's super cheap. You don't want to spend $1,000 on merch for a band that you don't even know if anybody's gonna buy from. You know what I mean? And so it definitely changed as time went on, but at the beginning it was for affordability and just and to have something that was like unique and that felt a little bit more like arty, you know what I mean? Rather than just like a packaged jewel cased CD. And so, but then beyond that, like I remember when we got into doing like the Burn Your Bones record.
Incredible record, by the way. Incredible record.
Thank you. But we got approached by a label that was like relatively well established for that sort of music and all that stuff, and we learned very quickly that they had a completely different goal than we did. We wanted to do all kinds of the special packaging and like do this crazy thing and this and that and the other thing, and they were interested in cutting every single corner possible and making just a cheap duplication, and we found this out a little bit after we had kind of agreed to do the record, but there wasn't anything like signed or anything like that, and so we just kind of backed out. And we're just like, you know what? We'll just front a bunch of money together and do it ourselves. And that was kind of the beginning of that. Like it still was a pressed record, but we just like made our own little made up record label and put it out ourselves. And because we were starting to tour so much, things like distribution, it was all like it was all just shows and then like maybe selling to local distros or record stores wherever we went. It wasn't like yeah, there wasn't really much to it, but it just made more sense to us because like even early on, like there was like the youth stuff was like these spray painted jewel cases, you know,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
we had proper CDs stamped and screen printed like by a plant, but then we put them into these handmade Xerox booklets and these spray painted like, and that was very much Juan. Like, you know, Juan and Kenny made that like their art project, and they went and did that. Like that was another thing too. Like I don't know many bands even still that function with the level of delegation where like each person kind of has a role that they deal, and
Mm-hmm.
but because it really does allow for like a lot more to happen. You know, so like because I was recording, I had just started recording like a year before Comadre started, about a year and a half before Comadre started.
Right.
And so I was able to handle that. So recordings were free. And then Juan was definitely, you know, had had taken the lead on like doing artwork and like and manufacturing things and screen printing and whatnot. Kenny naturally excelled at like dealing with like early social media like Facebook and
Customer
like
service, kind of like.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
not even like more like he was like networking, you know. So like
Yeah, yeah.
through Facebook and Viva La Vinyl, he was able to book a whole U.S. tour, you know, like and then my brother who like me started working at an early age and had money saved because where I had dumped a ton of money into recording and whatever guitar gear and stuff like that.
Yeah.
He had saved more money, so he had some to put up for if we needed to make a merch and stuff like that. So he ended up kind of being the label.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Wes was there to help with miscellaneous things, you know, to kind of lend a hand as needed. So with that sort of like a machine turning around, you know, like we could record whenever we wanted. We were making our own stuff, and like I don't know, it was just easier to like take anybody else out of the equation. You know what I mean? To not like, that's another thing too. When you're that used to being in charge of what you're doing and like having a hand in every single aspect of it, you don't like the idea that a label is now going to want to like have a say in how anything's going to go. You know, like it's like I don't care what you think about how the recording is mixed or what the artwork looks like. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like it's cool that you want to put the record out, but like that's kind of where it stops. You know, we don't need any more input. We already got 5 guys that are like weighing in pretty heavily. You know,
Right.
so but anyway, so that's where it all came from, really. And as time went on, we needed like more. We wanted to do like nicer stuff, and the demand was too high to do it all handmade. So like, you know, that's when you get into more pressed records and more like properly printed shirts and things like that. But yeah, the beginning was very, very handmade.
Man, and I love that. I mean, I have like an old Comadre shirt. I don't know if it was one. It was a blue shirt. You know, it's like a silhouette of somebody. I think it was one of your guys' friends,
Mm-hmm.
but it was screen printed, and like you can barely like decipher what the fuck it is. But
Yeah.
and I wore it so much because, you know, I was so proud to like kind of represent your guys' band. You know, it's just what it is cool about it is that it was really a project. There was always an art project attached to every record that you guys had released up until the self-titled, you know. And especially with, you know, and I'm gonna have to agree with you, man. Like the self-titled record, I so wished you guys were able to like kind of tour that longer, you know. And that had to be one of my favorite records that you guys had released because the production was you know what I mean? The production was awesome. You had your recording chops like kind of down to the T. This is what I wanted to sound like, and I think you guys were kind of heading to more of an experimental route, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like that was a high concept record that took a lot of convincing to pull off. You know, like it was like when I first kind of pitched the idea of how that could be done or how the record could be approached or whatever, it definitely wasn't like it it wasn't like a, yeah, totally, let's do that. It was kind of like, oh, like, this sounds a little convoluted, you know, like, I don't know about this whole, like, deconstructing the music and all that stuff. So I'm glad I pushed it, because you know, I'm very proud of that record still.
Yeah, as you should be. I mean, and what was cool is that you can kind of hear everybody's progression lyrically,
Mm-hmm.
compositionally. I mean, one of the songs that was very highly influenced in the instrumental post rock bands, I guess, was part of like a Chrome bag commercial, I guess you can say, right?
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, and I think Juan had some sort of involvement with like a limited edition of one of the Chrome
Yes.
bags, and I was like, dude, this is it. Like, you know, Comadre is gonna like forever. You know what I mean? Like, this is forever. And then when I found out that you guys, you know, and with you know, with understanding the circumstances, you know, one has, you know, family, your brother has a family, you have a
Yeah.
recording studio. You know, Kenny, I think recently at that time got married.
Yeah.
I think Wes was playing drums for Hard Sounds for a bit too, right?
Yeah, that was kind of a fill-in thing. Like, my brother and Wes were playing bass and drums when Hard Sounds first started.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
but that was more, that was that never like eclipsed anything. That was kind of just a thing, you know, a friend thing they were doing.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was a weird, like, honestly, I think we were all I think we all knew that it was going to be the last record. That it was kind of like, it was like, this is it. This is what we've done. And like, and I was expecting, though, that we'd make it to like 10 years, and
Hmm.
like do the record and do the tours and kind of like wrap it up nicely. But yeah, unfortunately, like, it just didn't go like that.
Right, right, right. Um, but I mean, you know, it's. Are you still there, Jack?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, okay, because it was kind of breaking up a little bit.
Okay.
So well, I'm very much glad that, you know, you're kind of continuing on this path, and I guess we can kind of move on a little bit further into now, like, kind of the future aspects of things. Let's sort of talk about your studio now, and now to kind of like backtrack, the Atomic Garden was created in what was that? What was it?
Well, what city?
Yeah, what city?
Well, so I mean, I first started out of my parents' house in San Carlos,
That's
which is
right.
like, it's
That's
like
right.
the next city north of Redwood City. Um, Again, very similar to Comadre. It was a right place, right time type of scenario, where like there wasn't really anybody doing like DIY recording,
Right.
like accessible recording that like wasn't in like a nice studio or whatever. And so and there was a ton of kids in the peninsula, like the peninsula being the area between like San Francisco and San Jose, basically.
Yep.
Uh, and there were a ton of kids. I happened to be a part of that scene, you know, this group of folks. And so I think it was a no-brainer for a lot of people, where it was like, oh, recording done by a person that we know, in a place that's 10 minutes from where we live. Let's go, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think within a year of getting a computer that had a Pro Tool system on it, that was like extremely, you know, limited, in terms of like what you could record and how you could record. I was like paying rent, you know, with recording money. And I wasn't even charging that much, you know, but like, but there was just that much to do. It was busy, and there was a lot of friends, and like, granted, the rent wasn't crazy, you know. I
Sure.
think
Sure.
I was paying like $500 a month to my parents, because I was running a recording studio out of their house. And so and that was 2003. So it's been
Wow.
15 years, just this past month, actually. And
Wow.
so, but yeah, so as soon as I finished school, I was like, all right, I'm going to get out of my parents' house, and I'm going to make a little studio somewhere and see how it goes. And the whole idea was that, that I would live there and not have a home studio, because the home studio always has some weird stigma to it where it's like not really a studio.
Yeah.
And to some degree that's true. But also not. It's all different for everybody's situation. But I was like, I don't want a home studio. I want a studio, and I'll live there because that's the only way that it can be affordable, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so now you're back to the DIY thing. So like my buddy Dan Africa and I got this warehouse space in East Palo Alto, which is just like 10 minutes from where I grew up.
That's right.
And,
yeah.
And so we got this like 2,500 square foot warehouse space, which was awesome. It was so cool. And it's crazy that we're talking about it because I literally moved out of it like 4 days ago. And so, but we got this space, and it was this kind of weird space where it was like divided in like threes, where there was like these weird offices in the front and this kind of weird open section in the middle, and then this warehouse space in the back. And so it was perfect. So we got the space, we built this thing. It was like this freestanding structure that a bunch of punk kids just built together with almost no instruction and no professionals involved. And I can tell you, the guys that I hired to do the demolition, they said, hey, this place was built pretty well, because it took a hell of a lot of effort to tear it down.
Wow.
But anyway, it's a common mistake, is that when you don't know what you're doing, you kind of overdo, you know?
Yeah.
And so we built this little 4-room, like freestanding structure. It was 800 square feet.
Yeah.
And that's where I was there for 12 and a half years. And I lived there, and I worked there damn near every day. And, and the low overhead of having this place and sharing it with a bunch of people, like my friend Dan and his girlfriend, Allie at the time, lived in the front half of the place, and he did screen printing out of the front.
Yeah.
And so, and then I lived in the back and did the studio, and then we had like the middle third was just kind of communal area, and we had this like kind of punk house warehouse thing, and you know, like a lot of these places are, it's like undocumented, you know, like nobody had a business license, nobody had a permit, nobody had permission to do anything. It's like everything that was happening in this little space was illegal, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you know, you're not allowed to live there. You weren't allowed to build this thing. You don't have a business license to do business. You're certainly violating some kind of building codes and, you know, fire code and all that. But it was really affordable. And so the thing that I was kind of like banking on was, I need something that's so cheap that even if this fails miserably, that I could pay for it with like a part-time job. You know what I mean? Like, and have a place to live and have a place to do the studio with like very little money. And there was very little money at the beginning. But it worked because it was just cheap, you know? And then as things started to get busier, and I got better at it, and I could charge a little more, that low overhead was the thing that let me like save a ton of money and buy better equipment and like do all that stuff. And so, yeah, it was a crazy time, man. Like looking at the new situation is so different. It's just kind of crazy to think about how it was for so long.
Well, and here's the thing that I was, because when I was listening to the podcast that you conducted, or that you got interviewed for last year, I believe it was last year. I'm not sure. I think I did call you right after I listened to that. I did call you right after listening to that podcast, and it was kind of asking you if you had any kind of internships available. But anyway, I digress.
Yes.
Now, aside from kind of you know, being the man to the go-to man, and you kind of were the person sort of responsible of like delivering kind of the sound in the Bay Area punk, Bay Area hardcore, even Bay Area metal in some cases. How important is it for you to be documenting these bands in the period that they were recorded? I mean, how many like boxes upon boxes of CDs, of tapes that you have kept, that you said, I might revert back to this and may do something with it, like, because
like catalog that I've built up or whatever over the
yeah,
years.
yeah. I mean, because I listened to Ian Mackay quite a bit, and
Mm-hmm.
a while back he did a project on all the live recordings that Fugazi did,
Mm-hmm.
and he also stressed the idea of, like, documentation. How important is it to you to be documenting these bands and sort of like show, like, this is what it sounded like to be in a band from 2003 to 2010 or 11?
Right. I mean, it's very important. It's a huge honor to me, you know what I mean, to have been involved in so many of these things, especially like uh so many of these people that I've worked with are good friends, or like, or people even from around the world, where after traveling around, you come home um with people wanting to like send you their record to mix or master or whatever, like it's very important to me. I have a big collection of anytime I see a record that I've worked on, I will buy it, like no matter where I am or what I'm doing, because it's like that collection is like, it's crazy to me. I
Mm-hmm.
have, and I try to keep a lot of this stuff in terms of an archive. um I do have a hard drive that has every single master on it of anything that I've ever recorded, like
Yeah, yeah.
since day one, because it is important to me. I try to hang on to all that stuff.
And that I'm very much like interested in that. I really do appreciate the fact that you had been the one to capture all of that, in the time that I was in California,
Hmm.
and especially, like, being, kind of witness to some of this stuff. It's been crazy, man. You guys are the most fucking responsible people in a band I've ever fucking known, man. I swear to God, you can't tell me that that is wrong. You're so responsible, dude. You know,
I'm
you know what I'm saying?
I'll speak for myself and say that yes, I am personally very responsible. uh but yeah, yeah, well, thank you. That's very nice of you to say.
It's true. It definitely is true. And so, I'm gonna go ahead and just wrap this up and kind of just seeing what is the future of the newest location of the studio. I think I heard that you had some investors kind of going in, and a lot of help to kind of build up this studio.
Yeah.
Is this studio located on like an old supermarket?
um no, it's the building could be a supermarket. It's very, very big. No, it used to be I think it was a social security office, actually.
Oh, okay.
The last thing was it's just a big kind of nondescript commercial building, but yeah, we're in East Oakland. Um, this new thing is a whole new world for me. I'm still kind of like in awe that we pulled it off, but it did take a village,
Yeah.
a handful of us went in on the building together, and then a handful of us now are going in on the studio together, on top of that. Um, and I do live here again, just like the last place, but this time it's all above board, like everything's, to code and uh, legal and all that stuff. So, uh, but yeah, I mean, in terms of the future, the new spot is like is without a doubt a like world class professional, like professionally built and designed recording studio. Like I hired a high end designer, or not high end. I don't even know what that means. But I hired like a very like well respected and accomplished studio designer who's been doing it for decades, and he and his team do an incredible job with the physics and the acoustics and the visuals and all that stuff. So um, we're just getting settled in finally. There will be photos posted
Oh,
on the
thank
website.
God. Thank God.
Yeah, uh, we're getting everything together. I've been functioning out of this space for uh,
Oh, you there?
the other.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
what's that?
No, no, you were breaking up. You said the last thing I heard is you've been functioning in this space for how long?
For a few months now.
Okay. All right.
So I've done a few months worth of recording here. So there's 2 studios here that are both kind of private rooms that are each run by like I run one side and a new guy runs the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And even that, there's like a pair of guys. There's a friend who brought me together with this other engineer who had been working at Fantasy Studios in Berkeley, which it looks like is now closing. And so this will be a whole new chapter, maybe even just for Bay Area recording. There's a lot of in the last couple of years that this project has been underway here. A bunch of places have closed in the Bay Area, probably 4 or 5 studios, like bigger studios too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. The first record to be completed here was the new Ghostlim LP, and I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
There's
I definitely am.
Yeah, there's I mean, I don't know. The future, I imagine, isn't going to look all that different than the last 10 years. It's just going to people. The calendar is full and people are coming to record, and I don't know. There's not I was going to kind of keep on trucking. Everything sounds better already. The rooms sound incredible, and like the way I hear in the control room is so much different than than my like DIY room. That I tell people it's like it almost feels like cheating now because like I can hear everything so well that like that it's a lot easier to make informed decisions when you're making a record. So and like we have air conditioning now, which is like in the last spot I had one of these little like R2D2 kind of units,
Yeah,
that,
I remember that on the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gnarly, and it's loud as hell, and like it's on all day long, and it barely keeps the room to like 85 degrees, and like I'm sure all my gear wasn't happy about it, and all the musicians were like troopers about the last spot, but now we don't have to be anymore because it's a lot more comfortable.
Absolutely, man, and I'm glad that you've kept persistent at it, and and I know that you're one to not say no in things. One thing that I've really appreciated about you as a recording engineer and a producer is the fact that you kind of take an approach how Steve Albini approaches it, and they came to you to make a good record, and you try to do the best you can to make it sound like a good record.
Mm-hmm.
And you try not to, obviously there's some types of music I'm sure that you're like, I'm not too big into that, but you kind of leave your sort of biases like behind to help a customer, an artist,
Sure.
To help an artist really achieve, a project. And it's because of you guys, there's a reason why punk is still alive. And though that, it may not be like the forefront of people's minds on especially in this musical landscape, I still look up to you guys as a guide to kind of say, you know what, I can do that, and I don't have to spend a bunch of money doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say, Jack, dude, I really appreciate you kind of, coming into this podcast, giving me the opportunity to speak with someone that I look up to quite a bit in the scene, and to know that, you've been a big proponent on my life as, not only as a musician, but as a workaholic of some sort. And someone who was also passionate about the scene, at the time that, we needed it. And, for you, Wes, your brother, Juan, and Kenny to be part of it, you guys really influenced a lot of people to live on and make great music. Is there anything that you wanted to shout out before we end this episode?
I mean, I want to thank you a lot, man. Everything you're saying is extremely flattering, and I don't know, I really appreciate it. It's nice to hear. I'm glad that it's had such a positive impact on you.
Absolutely. And I think you're one of the reasons why, like, I kind of went in through straight edge. I don't know if you still kind of follow that.
I do.
Yeah.
I'm a habitually, sober person, I think. Which again, it goes all the way back to skateboarding. Like when I was growing up, like the local shop that I went to, the guy that ran the show was a straight edge guy, and he was really into like getting the kids into it, and like, and I remember even, I don't know, reading an interview with like, I think it was like James Thomas or something like that, like back in the day. And he talked about how the outside of his body got so beat and, that he didn't want to like compromise the insides, and like, I don't know, for whatever reason, that just made a ton of sense to me when I was young. Cause I was a skateboarder and like I identified with that. So, but yeah, that's cool, man. That's awesome.
Absolutely, man. Well, thank you very much, dude. And so you got is the studio active now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've been here for a few months, and the new guys are starting, I think, like a week from today or something.
Anything that you wanted to shout out before we end the podcast?
Gosh, I don't know, man. Anybody who's been, anybody who's participated in any of this over the last like 15 years, I'm eternally grateful. I certainly wouldn't be where I am without all the friends and colleagues or whatever you want to call them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's an honor to be the person who gets to document all that stuff for all those people. So thanks, everyone.
Jack, thank you very much. And when I come back to California, I'll treat you out to some vegan pizza and some coffee. Okay. And you know you're down for that shit.
Always. I am like my contractor says. I have a pro food agenda. Is what he says every time I ask him if he wants lunch. So I definitely identify with that. So anyway.
All right, man. Jack, I'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Thanks so much, brother.
Thanks, man.
All right. Bye.
And that about wraps it up for this episode of the Bueno Power Hour podcast. I wanted to say thank you to Jack Shirley for taking the time on his busy schedule to talk to me about sort of his upbringing in music, being in a Comadre, kind of just touching on a couple of things about the music scene and his current agendas and future agendas. I'm gonna tell you guys something, man. Comadre was a big influence, especially when I was in the band Elmo Marconi, and something about Comadre just did it for me. You know what I mean? They captured something that no other band had captured for me, and to be able to kind of have that kind of impact, especially for how much work ethic they had from the beginning to end as a band. I identified with that, and I still kind of keep that, kind of that thought in mind that, what would Comadre do, to be honest. Man, it's kind of a dream come true to kind of like talk to Jack, to tell you the truth. And, I'm hoping to, interview the rest of the crew, his brother, Wes, Juan, and Kenny. And those guys seem like really cool dudes and just total dorks, you know what I mean? And I love being around punk dorks. So, guys, if you guys are listening to this podcast, I hope that I can interview you and sort of get your take on the band and kind of see where you guys come from in punk. So that pretty much wraps it up, man. Guys, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you later in the next episode. Bye.